In this video, I will be reviewing The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. So this is not a typical type of book for me to read. It is a romance vampire book, which I don't typically read either of those. I don't know if vampire is a genre, but yeah, I typically don't read romance. I like romance, just not romance on its own. I guess this would be more romantasy. It is definitely fantasy. It is high fantasy. So yeah. Basically, the idea of this book is that there is a kind of event that happens every 100 years or so, something like that, where a bunch of vampires are competing in this kind of trial event collection of trials to win. And if they win, they get to wish for something from the god. So yeah, it is pitched as a mixture of Hunger Games and with vampires in it. I would say a more accurate pitch is Squid Game with vampires in it in a fantasy setting. Basically, the main character is the adopted daughter of the king, and she is going through this event. So, yeah. My thoughts on this book. I think the premise is very interesting and well executed. I don't really know how well it is a Hunger Games, type thing, but I know that's just kind of a marketing thing. I think as if you were to say Squid Game, I feel like it is very good at executing that. It is very similar in that sense because there's a collection of trials, and during each trial, the number of contestants goes down. Hint, they die, right? A lot of people are gonna die. So yeah, they're vampires actually, not people. But so that part is very interesting and fun, and there's a nice progression to it. Yeah, it's great. And of course, it is a romance too. So there is a romantic relationship in the book. Okay, before I continue on with the video, I just want to ask you to subscribe and like the video, leave a comment if you want to, and if you don't subscribe, you are going to be bitten by a vampire. So make sure that you subscribe to avoid such an awful fate. And if you do want to get bitten, that's your choice, man. You cannot subscribe. I mean, you're making a big mistake, but you do you. So yeah, let's get on with the video. And speaking of that, I guess the next thing I want to talk about is the characters, which are probably the best part of this book, because there's a good cast of characters. Not a lot by any means, but I don't know. I feel like there's like 5 characters, but they're well fleshed out. They're interesting. They feel a little typical at times, stereotypical, but they avoid being cliche by having interesting backstories, good dynamics with each other, and interesting relationships. So, as I mentioned, there's a romantic relationship, which is very well executed, if not corny at sometimes in terms of just the writing about this relationship, but on an emotional level, it is well executed. I think my favorite relationship, maybe not my favorite, but I think it's just really interesting that there is a good focus on other relationships besides the romantic one. It almost feels like this book could not be a romance and just a fantasy book with a romance in it, honestly, because the other relationships are very well done. Specifically, the father-daughter relationship is very interesting. There's also friendships and rivalries, which are all well executed. Nothing amazing, nothing mind-blowing, just good, just well done, decent. And yeah, the plot progression is very good as well. I never felt bored during this book. It always felt interesting, always kept the stakes high. And there's kind of 2 plots running at the same time, which definitely helps balance things out. It helps builds suspense for the action, and the action builds suspense for the relationship plot, because that's really the two plots happening. There's a romantic relationship plot and kind of the more action game type trials plot, and they obviously intertwine, and yeah, they both balance out well, and there is a lot less action than I thought there would be, but I actually think that's a good thing, because the lack of action makes the action that there is very, very intense, very fun. So yeah, that aspect is very good. In terms of writing, that is definitely the weaker point of the story, of the book. So the writing feels very clunky at times and very amateurish. I don't know. I should have looked it up, but I don't know how early on this book is in the author's career. I know this book is the first book in a duology, in a series of duologies. So I think there's going to be 3 duologies. This is the first book in the first duology. The second one's already out. I'm probably not going to read it. But yeah, the writing just feels, to be honest, it reminds me a lot of my own writing in my first book. I'm on my second one, by the way, so I do think it has improved a lot, but it reminds me of the writing in my first book. Like when I go and look through there, it reminds me of that a lot. A lot of telling, not enough showing is really the biggest issue. There's a lack of subtlety in the character emotions, the character themes even. The themes aren't too bad. That doesn't hit you over the head as much as like the character emotions do. Specifically like being told how angry the character is without it being shown, or how sad the character is without it being shown, stuff like that. And I get that it is a first person perspective, so you're inherently going to be in the character's head a lot more, but I think it's just more about the ratio of showing to telling rather than, there never being any telling. It's just that there should be more showing than telling, because I have read first person perspective, point of view books that I don't feel that way about, so it's not just that I don't like first person. So yeah, that's a huge problem for me. It definitely decreases my enjoyment of the book quite a bit because of how clunky the writing is, how kind of spoon-fed, it is like I'm an adult and the author is cramming a spoon in my mouth the whole time, like eat your food, and I'm just like, yo, I'm adult, I can feed myself. But it's not that bad. I'm being a little over dramatic. It's still very entertaining to read. Like I mentioned before, the pacing's great. There's never a boring moment in this book, but it does have moments of quieter moments and more action-heavy, intense, emotional moments too. But regardless, even in the quieter moments, it's never boring. It's always interesting. The other thing I guess I didn't know is like the world building. I think I'm pretty conflicted on the world building in this book, because it is very good. There's a lot of really interesting details. I really like the gods, the religious aspect. It feels very Greek mythology, but vampires. But it's unique. It's not Greek mythology. It's just that it's why can't I think of what it's called? Not monotheistic religion. I don't know. I can't think of what the word is. So there's several gods, but in this world, in this book, I don't know how it will be in different books. There's one central main god for the vampires, so it's just all really interesting. My only issue with the world building is that despite all the interesting aspects of it, it feels a little empty sometimes, and I think that's because of the lack of exploration of like everyday things. It just like it feels, I guess, also just lack of interaction with other characters. Like, you kind of only interact with the same few characters, and the rest of the world is just kind of random dare I say, NPC characters, as corny as that is to say. But yeah, still the world building is good and interesting, and I think given that this author plans on writing, 5 other books, well, 2 of them already written, but aside from this first one, there's going to be 5 other ones set in this world. I can really see that, and I can really see it improving. I also would like to know in terms of the writing, it does improve throughout the book. So that's good. That's really good to see. I like when books are more consistent with the writing, but for someone that's kind of newer, it's nice to see the writing improve throughout the book. But maybe it would have been better if it would have been cleaned up towards the beginning more. Still, the whole book has issues with writing, but it is better towards the middle, after the middle half, the end half of the book. So yeah. I think that is all I have to say. I'm going to rate this book a 6.5 out of 10. I think I rated it a 3.5, which out of 5, which would technically be 7 out of 10, but I just don't really think it deserves that 7 out of 10 mark. I think mainly just because of the writing and because the other details aren't absolutely exceptional. I would have wished that there was more detail given in descriptions and during the action scene as well. So I think a 6.5 out of 10 is good. I did enjoy it. If you like vampires, if you like romance, if you like fantasy, you don't mind kind of simpler writing, I think you will love this book. It's not really my thing, honestly, but yeah, and my 6.5 out of 10 is mainly based on my overall enjoyment of the book. You might enjoy it way more. So yeah, it's a good read. I recommend it if that's the kind of thing you're into. And if you don't really like romance, you still might like this book because there's a lot of things outside of the romance that this book has to offer. So yeah, I think if you just look at it as a fantasy, you will like it more. So yeah, 6.5 out of 10. This was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. And make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share. Let me know what you thought of this book in the comments. Did you read it? Are you going to read it? And yeah, see you next time.